of your personal and professional pathways. And what I hope to pass on to you today are some tips to help you get started on this wonderful journey of creating better integration between what you need to accomplish for your professional success with also keeping in mind what your personal success would involve. So we're going to cover a little bit of a definition just to make sure we're all on the same page, talk about what some of the challenges are. What are some of the downsides? What happens when life is unbalanced? And I hope to provide both, a personal perspective on that, as well as some interesting things to look out for those who manage others in the workplace who may also have challenges with life integration. We'll talk about some strategies. I do have a practice exercise that I typically do for live workshops, and I'm happy to pass along any homework assignments for anyone who's interested to do that offline. And then if there are any questions, hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end to address any of your questions. All right. So here's a definition that I found pretty useful over the course of time. Brian Dyson, who was the CEO of Coca-Cola from 1959 to 1994, and he says, imagine life as a game in which you're juggling 5 balls in the air. You name them: work, family, health, friends, spirit, or any definitions that you need to apply for all of the things that are important to you. And you'll soon understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it's going to bounce back most of the time. But the other ones, family, health, friends, and spirit, are made of glass. And if you drop one of these, they'll be irrevocably scuffed, marked, nicked, damaged, or even shattered. They'll never be the same. And you have to understand that and strive for balance in your life accordingly. So some other more scientific definitions. Well, Wikipedia, of course, in our day is a go-to source for many of us. And the expression of work-life balance was first used in the late 70s, and it was designed to just describe balance between work and personal life. But they really didn't go a whole lot further than that at the time. More recent definitions really tend to divide work into and personal life into more subcategories: family, friends, and so on. So you can look up many definitions on the internet and pick one that you feel works for you and how you view your life. So talking about this redefinition, and again, I use this term integration because there's no such thing as pure balance. Balance implies a perfect state, and we all know that life is constantly changing, work is constantly changing, demands in each of those quadrants of our lives are always changing. So I prefer to use the definition of integration. And I feel that helps to create a better understanding or a better perspective for people as you're approaching the idea of, okay, how do I get these things more in check with each other? So why is balance so difficult to maintain? Well, we all know in our society today, the American worker in particular has the least vacation time of any modern developed society on the globe. Changing demands of the workplace. We're all doing much more with much less resources, less funding, less people. And we've got global businesses now, and many businesses operate 24 hours a day as they span operations into different parts of the globe. And so many of us who work in businesses where we do interact with folks in Europe, Asia, developing markets, that oftentimes conference calls happen at 4 in the morning, depending on what time zone you're in and who you're calling. Advanced communications. I think just about everyone has a smartphone. I know I personally carry mine with me 24/7. And so that helps to support and foster contact anytime, anywhere. Now, this is a double-edged sword. In some cases, it can allow you to have quick communication, outside of the office and be available when you need to, particularly if you're a manager or someone in a senior level position where people are waiting for you or need support or guidance in making decisions. The downside is you could be sitting on vacation trying to have a family dinner with your children and, ping, 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 the phone is going off, interrupting your chain of thought. More people are starting to work from home. I know that there's been some recent backlash in the press about companies now bringing people back in because sometimes the work from home thing doesn't work. But there are lots of people that do have virtual offices. And again, while that can make it more attractive to bosses who don't have to pay the overhead, for example, of additional office space, It can create a challenge for the home life in the sense that, unless you have a dedicated office in your house and you can shut the door or you can turn the ringer off on the phone, you're pretty much accessible all day and all night to, clients or coworkers, colleagues, and so forth. Our economic climate, obviously, again, we're doing more with less. People are sometimes working longer hours to make up for lack of funds and lack of personnel resources. And then, of course, you have dual career households that have children and family responsibilities, and both parents are working, and that creates some additional challenges. So I'm sure for folks listening on the line, you've experienced at least one of these things over the course of time, getting in the way of either, promoting a successful and productive workday, but also promoting a successful and productive personal time, whether that's, family, friends, hobbies, activities. So what happens when life becomes unbalanced? Well, there are some pretty devastating mental and emotional effects. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the fight or flight syndrome, but fight or flight syndrome is a stress response in the human body where we create, or our body creates for us, adrenaline and high levels of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And in terms of the negative sides of having too much of this coursing through your system, well, it can cause things like exhaustion, anxiety, depression, job burnout, strained relationships. There are also links to physiological effects, and particularly cortisol is one of those stress hormones that, again, in that fight or flight syndrome and the emergency is the one that helps, women lift up the car to save their, child or something like that. But over the long term, it can create health issues, headaches, high blood pressure. It's been linked to increases in diabetes, weight gain. Your immunity, your immune system is lowered oftentimes by too much cortisol coursing around the system. And so one of the things that managers can look out for are things like absenteeism, low morale, high turnover, people taking more than the average number of sick days. These are all signs of stress becoming too much and then having a negative effect on the workplace. And, just from a practical perspective, if you think about that sense of emergency that you have, that anxiety, some people get it in their chest with trouble breathing. Some people get it with, their stomach churning and feeling, difficult to digest food. These are all signs that you've got too much adrenaline and too much stress hormones coursing through your system. So again, these are ways that physically you can be attuned to that can help you realize when something is out of whack and you need to take that break. So I have a few stories of people that I've encountered over the course of time that I feel have done some really successful things in terms of balancing or integrating their work lives and their personal lives. And these are all real people. Some of the names have been changed to protect the innocent, of course. But the working mom, Liza, again, a two-career household, 3 young children. And at the time, she was being challenged by, okay, how do I fulfill the responsibilities and my desires to be a good mother, but also continue to advance my career and, get things organized that way. One of the things that Liza was lucky enough to encounter was having a relative nearby that was able to help pitch in on some of her childcare. In her case, it was a mother-in-law. So she was able to arrange with her mother-in-law to be able to pick up the kids after school, bring them home, entertain them, make sure their homework got done, and sometimes put a late dinner on the table so that when Liza returned home from work, as did her husband, that they could sit down and enjoy a nice family dinner without having to rush around and maybe be stressed out. Oh, if I don't get out of work on time, I'm going to not be able to pick up the kids. And how am I going to get dinner on the table, a healthy dinner for my family, when I'm not getting home after my long commute until 6:30 or 7 p.m., or in some cases later. One of the other interesting things that Liza did as well is to schedule one night during the week where her husband would come home early from work and relieve the mother-in-law, and the two of them would go out and do something together, like take a walk or I don't know, manicures, pedicures, things like that, so that they could experience some time outside of just the, you're working for me relationship. Another woman that I had the pleasure of working with was Anne. She was a young single up-and-comer, has been very successful in her career since then, so I'm told. But Anne had a wonderful passion on the side of work, which was writing. And what she would do to be able to carve out time in her schedule to continue her writing, her passion, was to come in early, an hour before everybody else in the morning in her cohort. And so she could get a lot of things done and cleared off without that interruption of, cube stop-bys and people demanding things and clients being online. So just adding that extra hour to her day in the morning allowed her to get, 2 or 3 hours worth of work done in that hour before everybody else started coming into the office. And then she would leave at the exact same time every day, no matter what happened. She would leave, she would go home after work, she would write, and then taking advantage of our current technology, she would log back in to the system late in the evening just to check in to make sure that no client requests had come in and that she could take care of some things, again, preparing herself for the next morning. And just having that, couple of hours every day to focus on her writing made her feel, again, much more integrated in terms of balancing, okay, I want to be successful in my job, but I also want to be really successful at my passion. The overachiever. Bob was someone who I have the pleasure of working with, and no relation to any of the Bobs that are online now. But Bob was, again, really, really dedicated to having a successful career, had ended up having a baby. And for the first few months, just the challenges of having a young infant at home were creating some disorganization for him. And he's a person who works so hard that his outlet had always been working out and physical fitness. And, again, those first few months with the small child were making it nearly impossible to do that. So, again, he and his wife sort of came up with a schedule that at least a few days a week, Vince would go to the gym either before work or after work. His wife would adjust her hours on those days so that she could make sure that they had care for their child, but that he would be able to do that, and vice versa. So they were able to kind of balance back and forth between the two of them, alternating gym days and gym times. Another person that I had the pleasure of working with several years back was Chris. And Chris had worked in the company's headquarters office for a few years, so had proven himself. And again, a situation where is it a dual career household, and with kids in the picture and longer than average commute time for most parts of the country, Chris found that he was, lacking the amount of time that he wanted to be able to spend with his family. So he was able to arrange a trial period of 3 months with his managers to be able to create a home office. And in that sense, he was able to, again, eliminate a very long commute. So at least an hour and a half each way got put back into the pool of both personal time, spending time with family and children, but also the office got another additional hour and a half worth of work out of him just because he was spending that time working and not commuting. Needless to say, after the 3 months, things were so successful that that particular company ended up adding more and more virtual workers over the course of time. An interesting tip for managers here is if you do go the virtual route, a few suggestions. One is to encourage your virtual employee to have a dedicated office space in the home. Ideally someplace where you can shut the door and have an office that you can go into physically and then physically at the end of the day go out of and shut the door so that it doesn't encroach upon too much upon the personal time, but also that you have a very an area that's really dedicated, that the energy there is working. It's kind of the same idea. If anybody out there has insomnia and has been told by their doctor, don't work on a computer in bed, don't watch TV, beds are for sleeping. Well, offices should be for work. And so it's gonna be less successful if you're trying to work from your kitchen table in terms of creating that successful work like integration. And that happens on both sides of the coin too. It's takes away from the focus on work, but it also takes away from the focus on the personal life as well. And then someone that I don't actually personally know but have read about And there is an article in Fortune magazine somewhere, but apparently the international CEO of Pepsi, and I believe she's still there, has a habit or a hobby on the side of playing music. And apparently one of the things that they do to help balance their work and life integration is she and some of the other senior folks get together and jam some music from time to time. So again, just a way of taking that stressful environment, creating fun, allowing people to sort of get a step back, let their hair down a little bit, and then come back to work much more refreshed. So I've started to talk a little bit about some tips and tricks, and I'll continue to weave those in throughout the rest of the presentation. But one of the biggest things that you can do is ask the questions of yourself. What are the things that are important to me? What is it that I'm missing? And where am I lacking? Where is work suffering because of either a lack of focus created by something going on in my personal life, or where is my personal life suffering? A lot of people, particularly in our society today, complain, well, I don't have time to exercise, I don't have time to do this, I don't have time to do that. Well, what are the things that are important to you? And can you make a commitment to yourself to focus on one, and perhaps taking that baby step to add one thing in, or to create a little bit more focus on one thing in your life? Again, to start to create that sense of commitment to it, and then be able to hopefully feel much more integrated. The late Steve Jobs has a great quote that I think can help you start on that pathway. When he was 17, I'll read it in his words. When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, "If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." And it made an impression on me, and since then, for the past 33 years, I've looked in the mirror every day and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, what I want to do what I'm about to do today. And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know that I need to change something. So where do you start? Well, again, taking a look in the mirror every day may or may not be practical for many of us. But if you can take a moment to sit down and, again, start to ask yourself those questions, but decide whether or not work-life integration is going to be a priority for you. And if you do decide to make it a priority, you have to first start with an assessment. And I have some tools, and I'll try to make these available to all of you, but I have lots of websites and articles that have some questionnaires and some ways in which you can start to assess your own life integration, because of course it's sometimes difficult to be totally objective when it comes to looking at your own situation. One thing that's very helpful is if you can talk with a friend or a coworker or someone else that knows you very well. Oftentimes they can help to create that mirror, that lens for you to look through that says, okay, here are the areas where things could be better. Then, of course, establishing a plan. And we all know in business, when we have plans, things tend to happen not always according to plan, but it helps us to accomplish our goals much better. And then, of course, taking baby steps. Work-life integration does not happen overnight. It is a constant challenge, and it is something that does need to change over the course of time as our priorities change, as things come up. And again, that's why I like to use that integration concept rather than balance, because balance implies there's this perfect homeostasis that can be achieved, when we really know that it's just constantly up and down, depending on who needs what when. Another really important thing to do is measure your progress. And again, I'm not suggesting that, we all start having calendars and looking every day and having a checklist, but that periodically you should take a few minutes to reassess. One thing that's worked for me is sitting down, once a year. I put it on my calendar. I usually try to avoid New Year's, because then it seems like a New Year's resolution, which, as we all know, tend not to happen the way we want them to. But once a year, I try to sit down and take a look at the plan that I've put in place, and look at, where have I been successful, and, where could I do better, and to sometimes, change what some of those quadrants mean and how they're defined. And periodically reassessing, coming back to your plan. Once a quarter is usually good enough for people to take a look and say, okay, what have I accomplished? What can I do better? So here are some other tips and tricks that I've found work over the course of time. And again, as I mentioned, it's baby steps. One thing, learn how to say no. Now, this can be very challenging in a business situation, particularly those who work with, any customers or any clients, whether they're internal or external. How do you say no to someone that needs something? Well, there's lots of ways to say no without actually saying no. Big one, delegating. Can you delegate a responsibility to someone else? Can you make a trade with someone else to take care of something that would normally be within your responsibility, and then maybe trade with them so that you take care of something for them at another time? Learning how to say no also includes not right now. This is another great phrase to practice in your head that says, okay, I can do this, but it's going to have to be tomorrow. I'm a personal fan of mantras. I'm not suggesting, again, that someone sit down in a dark place somewhere and start meditating, but it's a really good idea to remind yourself every once in a while that an empty glass quenches no thirst. And what that really means is if you don't take that time to recharge, rejuvenate, take those breaks from work, take that vacation that's planned for the year, you're not going to have any resources left internally to be able to go back and do your best. This is why we advocate things like getting up from the desk every few hours and making sure that you're walking around, stimulating the brain, breathing. Breathing is very important. A lot of us forget to breathe from time to time. So just keeping in the back of your mind that refueling, recharging actually has been scientifically proven to help the brain work better when you come back with a fresh perspective. Also very important is building a social support network. Again, this can be friends, this can be neighbors, it can be relatives. These are people that you want to build around you, a support system that you can trade off responsibilities and help each other out. And this can be as simple as establishing a carpool situation where certain parents take the responsibility of taking all the kids to school on certain days so that others can rush into the office more quickly. But it could also be something like, a group of people at lunchtime that say, okay, at 12:30, 2 days a week, it's not saying every day, but 2 days a week at 12:30, we're going to meet, we're going to go outside, we're going to take a walk, we're going to recharge our batteries so that we come back into the office situation, that we're refreshed, we've had a chance for our brains to take a breather, have had a chance for some of that adrenaline to go down, just breathing the fresh air. It's kind of similar to, when people first start working out, they talk about having a buddy system. So if you make an appointment with somebody to do something, you're a lot more likely to follow through with it rather than having the ability to say, oh, I'm going to do that later. Very important, if you do have things on your calendar, meetings, whatever, you can plan ahead. So let's say on an average day what your typical responsibilities are going to be in the office setting. Obviously, we can't plan for everything, but if you do carve out that time on your calendar, maybe it's a half an hour, maybe it's 15 minutes, but if you actually put the appointment on your calendar that says for 15 minutes I'm going to get up from my desk and do something else, or for 15 minutes I'm going to go take a walk, or I'm going to go grab a coffee, again, that is a built-in time for you to take that breather, to really allow that stress level to start coming down so that you can come back refreshed. One other thing that comes up a lot in these talks that I give are, so what do you do with all these other things that we have to do outside of work that don't include our important things like family and friends and spirit? Well, mowing the lawn or grocery shopping, dry cleaning. We live in a very modern society, particularly for those of you who live in large cities. You have things like dry cleaning services that will pick up and drop off your dry cleaning. This can save you, that 15, 20 minutes that you have to run that errand. Having someone take care of your lawn work. Again, not for everybody. Sometimes people find that doing things like that are one of the ways that they relieve some pressure and reduce some of the steam going on in the head there. But if you're not a person that enjoys that kind of thing, think of it as opportunity cost. And I know everything comes with a price, but we've all learned opportunity cost, at least in some class during our Drexel educations, where it's, what is the cost of you not doing something? So let's say you can carve out some additional funds to get that lawn mowed, or maybe it costs a little extra to get that dry cleaning. Well, what's that worth in terms of the value of your own time? So you have to think of your own time as an opportunity cost. Another one of my favorite mantras is a goal without a plan is just a wish. And again, I think in the business setting, most of us are familiar with having plans and setting goals and being able to say, okay, here's the plan. We don't always follow it to a T, things come up, but if you have the plan, then you have a framework and you have a structure to be able to work with. And then again, I think I mentioned this already, but making appointments for yourself and sticking to them. There are many studies out there that talk about how people can successfully integrate their work-life situations. And here's one particular study that says nearly 3 out of 4 entrepreneurs rely on family and meal times and regular exercise. But you can see that also taking planned vacations appears there too. There are lots of ways to take vacations and still be connected with the office. Again, one successful strategy that I've tried personally is to have half an hour carved off every day during the vacation where I check the email, I check the smartphone, I answer phone calls, and then I put it away and it doesn't stay connected. The email, the little pings that go off on the iPhone get turned off so that they're not bothering me during the course of the day, but yet I can still stay connected with the office. So I have a couple of people here asking some questions. Let me pause here for a moment. One of the questions is, people fear that saying no to your boss can be a really scary thing. That's a great one. That's one of those times where not saying the actual words no can be very successful. For example, not right now, or is a great one to use, because then you can provide a solution to your boss. So you can say, okay, here are the things that we need to accomplish. Here's what needs to be done. This is what I could take care of right now. And then here's a plan, solution. Here you go, boss. Here's a plan for how to get these other things accomplished. So it's not really necessarily saying no. It's just saying, okay, how can I reorganize this? Bosses are great when you ask them questions and sort of lead them to the water, so to speak. So a great way to say to your boss, okay, here are the things that need to be done. Which of these are most important to you? Which ones are make it or break it? And then how can I help to make or break those few, really focus in on those? And what can we deprioritize? Or what can we perhaps give someone else an opportunity to take care of so that they can learn a new skill or a new thing? So offering to train someone else on a particular task is also a really valuable way to say no. And Anna, thank you. Yes, asking about prioritization is really important. So again, just to hammer this in, taking a few minutes for yourself every single day is really critical in terms of, staying aware of your situation, being able to go inside, take that deep breath and say, okay, how's my stress level today? Am I taking care of the things that need to be taken care of, both in a personal way and in a professional way? Another mantra that's a great one is, will the world really stop turning if I don't do the following? This is an important question. I've worked for many years in the market research sector in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry. And like many other industries, pharmaceutical and biotech folks take themselves very seriously and the work that they do very seriously, and rightly so. Hopefully we're curing and taking care of more diseases and health problems than we have in the past. But at the end of the day, we're not actually performing the brain surgery. So no one's going to die if you don't do something right now at this moment. And again, that just goes back to maintaining your priorities, taking care of the things that are important to you while still being able to take care of other things. So it's just a matter of looking at time and saying, okay, when does this really have to be done? Outsourcing, I think I mentioned this before, hiring somebody to take care of the lawn, having the laundry delivered. I've also talked to some people who have started using home delivery grocery services. I know they're not available in all areas, but how wonderful to have healthy food delivered to your home so that you don't have to take that valuable time to go out to the supermarket and do a big food shopping all the time. Again, maybe you decide to use this once a month or once every few weeks for some staples, but again, it just helps to save some time. And so that leads me to my mantra, are we actually doing the brain surgery or not? So this brings me to some home practice. And again, I typically do this as an interactive workshop. And so I would normally hand out the story about the mayonnaise jar and 2 cups of coffee and ask people to conduct this exercise. But if you'll humor me for a few moments, I'll just read you the basics of this story. So there's a professor who's standing before his philosophy class, and he takes a empty mayonnaise jar and then fills it with golf balls. And he asks the students if the jar is full, and they all agree that it is. So then the professor picks up a box of pebbles and pours them into the jar. And the pebbles rolled into all the open areas between the golf balls. And he asks again the students if the jar is full, and they agree it is. So then he takes up a box of sand and pours that into the jar. And of course, the sand fills up the gaps between the pebbles and the golf balls. And now he asks again, is the jar full? And the students respond with an unanimous yes. The professor then produces 2 cups of coffee from under the table, and he pours them into the jar, filling up the empty space between the sands. And so the students laugh. So the professor says that I want you to recognize what this jar represents your life. The golf balls are the important things to you: God, family, children, health, friends, your favorite passions. Things that if everything else was lost and only they remained, your life would still be full. The pebbles are the other things that really matter to you, like your job, your house, your car, and the sand is everything else, the small stuff. So if you put the sand in the jar first, there's no room for the pebbles. And if you put the pebbles in first, there's no room for the golf balls. So the same goes for life. If you spend all your time and energy on the small stuff, you'll never have time for the things that are really important to you. So paying attention to the things that are critical to your happiness, playing with your children, taking time to get medical care, taking your partner out to dinner, playing some golf. There will always be time to clean the house and fix the disposal later. So one of the students asks, what about the coffee? What does that represent? And the professor, of course, says that no matter how full your life may seem, there's always room for a couple of cups of coffee with a friend. So again, I encourage you to think about the mayonnaise jar and the 2 cups of coffee story and go back and decide, what are your golf balls? What are your pebbles? What's your sand? And, what does the cup of coffee mean to you? And again, it seems very simplistic, but it's a great way to really understand and do that self-assessment. And that self-assessment, again, is going to help to determine what your plan is. Another exercise that I've used is writing your own obituary. And I know it may sound a little bit morbid, but if you actually sit down and write out the things that you hope that people will say about your life when you're gone, it can be very enlightening in terms of what's important to you, what you hope to accomplish, what you want your legacy to be. And I guarantee if you write your own obituary, nobody's obituary is going to say he or she was the hardest worker in the company. And I see Bob is making a very similar comment online here. So as you think about your legacy and the things that you hope to accomplish in your life, again, this can be a great way to help refocus. And when you do create your plan and when you do your review, you go back and you look at the things that you wrote in your obituary. You may change them. They do change over time, which is, again, why you do need to do a periodic reassessment. Your golf balls are probably not going to change. but some of the pebbles and some of the sand will. And so being aware, having an understanding and that perspective can be really, really valuable in helping you to figure out, okay, where are the places that I can do better? Where are the places where I can help to integrate my life better? So just before we go to some of the takeaways, I just wanted to give you a little bit of perspective into why I'm passionate about this topic and how I've, gone about over the years developing some of these strategies and talking to people about them. Well, I used to be one of those that worked, the 70, 80-hour weeks and forgot about everything else in my life because I was so concerned with, climbing to the top of my corporate ladder. And what I didn't realize was all the things that I was missing and all the time that I missed with my family. And I do come from a very large Italian family, so there's always a lot of things going on. And, turning around and looking and seeing some of my younger cousins all of a sudden being grown up, and, I hadn't participated in any of that. That's very important to me. So, unfortunately, which I would not hope for anyone in this room, I did have a situation where I did get burned out, and I did have a really serious health issue that came up, and it was caused by too much stress, too much working. I'd forgotten about exercise and forgotten about family and all that downtime. And I ended up getting really sick, and I ended up being out of work for several weeks, doctor ordered. And that, of course, gave me lots of time to think and reassess and come up with this. And in the years since that happened, I've definitely been much more cognizant of my own personal situation. How much am I working? How much am I, paying attention to all the things that are important to me? So one of the things I did after a few more years of working in a corporate setting, I did go out and become a consultant. So now I have a little bit more space in my calendar to take on projects, but then I have some extra time in between those projects to do the things that are important to me. For example, I teach regular yoga classes, and I have my avocation here of trying to share with people some different strategies on how to go about this integration challenge. So, some of the takeaways, I hope that you walk away today with just rethinking that definition of balance and really thinking of it as integration. How do you get these things all to work together in a way that benefits your personal life, your passions, your work life, your passions there, and any of the other things in your life that are important to you, whether they be family, an avocation, a hobby, whatever it is. Remember, it's the journey that counts. I know we have a very goal-oriented society, and we're all thinking about, the different definitions of success that we have. But it is really important to remember that the journey is what really counts, and it's how you get there that can really change what the end game is going to be like. Do expect that life is going to be constantly changing, that work is going to change, your responsibility is going to change, and you do need to prioritize differently at different times. Create a plan and take action. Even if it's 3 bullet points on a piece of paper that you stick up onto the side of your computer monitor, leave it at 5:30. Did you get up for lunch today? Did you walk around today? All of those things can be part of your plan. And then, of course, the most important one of all is laugh. And laughter is great medicine. It immediately helps to reduce some of those awful stress hormones that we talked about. It helps to clear adrenaline out of the system, and it can generally make you feel better about your perspective on life. And if you can get some other people laughing with you, that's even better. It is infectious. So with that, I will say thank you so much. And are there any other questions coming in from anyone online? I see a couple of folks typing here. All right. Well, it doesn't look like there are any other questions. So again, I thank you so much for your time and for listening to some of the advice here. And again, the Drexel folks have all of my contact information. I'm more than happy to share some of these slides and or some of the additional resources that I've developed. I do have a nice list that's available electronically that I can send out to you, as well as a copy of the mayonnaise jar and cup of coffee story. So thank you again.